live to the United Nations. That's the Security Council holding an open meeting about the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza. And that discussion was called by Russia, China and Algeria. On your screens right there is Antonia De Meo from UNRWA. That's the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. And she's speaking. Let's listen in.
Hostages and an increase in the flow of humanitarian supplies and commercial goods into Gaza. Second, to protect the mandate of UNRWA, including within the framework of a transition. UNRWA must continue providing services until a political solution is at hand. There is no credible alternative to UNRWA in Gaza and across the region. We need political and financial support now more than ever to continue our vital task of serving one of the most vulnerable communities in the world. And we hope that this council will speak out in one voice against attacks, legislative or otherwise, on the agency. Third, and finally, to advance a peaceful solution to this 7-decade-long conflict. The longer the war in Gaza persists, the further we drift from achieving a peaceful solution that will bring Palestinians and Israelis together, recognize our shared humanity, heal, and learn to live side by side in peace and security. This solution must also, at long last, bring an end to the plight of Palestine refugees. Thank you, Mr. President.
Я благодарю госпожу Де Мео за ее брифинг и сейчас предоставляю слово.
Okay, so we just caught the tail end of that, but what was going on there was that was the Deputy Commissioner General of UNRWA, Antonia De Meo, speaking to the Security Council. Kristen Saloomey is joining us now from the United Nations. So, Kristen, as we're saying, I mean, this discussion was called by Russia, China and Algeria. They're meant to be talking about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza that just seems to be getting worse. Just tell us what you've heard so far.
Absolutely. We heard an update about the difficulties facing the people of Gaza, particularly in the area of Khan Yunis, where attacks have continued and people have been trapped, unable to evacuate areas where they were ordered to flee from in recent days. And hearing from the Deputy Commissioner of UNRWA about the struggles to provide aid in an area that she described as complete lawlessness. I think it's worth pointing out that this meeting was called as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in the United States. He was appeared before Congress this week. Today, he is scheduled to talk to Donald Trump, the former president, at his estate in Florida. And I spoke to some council members on the way into the meeting, including the Chinese ambassador, one of the countries that called for this meeting, about why now, why today. Given the humanitarian situation, he said it was very important to keep the focus on the plight of the people in Gaza and what they are facing, and also to keep the pressure, he said, on the Israelis and the United States. It's Israel's strongest, most powerful ally in the council, to focus on getting a ceasefire and more aid into Gaza. We know also that the funding for UNRWA is very low, not what they say they need, and access to the people is very difficult. So this is the international community coming together to try to improve that situation.
Yeah, and Kristen, I'll stick with you for one more question. And just a moment ago, the UNRWA Deputy Commissioner also said that she's asking for, she's persisting rather in securing a ceasefire in Gaza, and she asked for the protection of UNRWA's mandate as well as a peaceful solution to the decades-long conflict. On the point she makes about protecting UNRWA's mandate, how divided is the international community on that, particularly when we've seen countries pull funding from UNRWA?
Absolutely. In the United States in particular, the biggest donor to the Palestinian situation at the United Nations, taking its funding from UNRWA and looking for other sources and other places to put it, has been a big problem for the United Nations, given that UNRWA is the organization with the most reach and the most capacity to help people in Gaza. So that remains a problem. Also a problem that the Secretary General spoke about just yesterday is the fact that aid workers continue to be attacked in Gaza. In the beginning of the week, 3 days in a row, aid convoys were shot at, came under fire, despite, as we just heard from the deputy commissioner, alerting the Israeli authorities of their movements and their whereabouts. One of these cars had 5 children in it. It was a UNICEF vehicle that was supposed to be reuniting children with family. It came under fire and was unable to do that. This, as the United Nations will point out time and again, is a violation of international law. So regarding UNRWA's power in the region, certainly addressing the humanitarian situation on the ground is a challenge, to say the least, and not reaching its full potential without support for UNRWA. But nonetheless, we just heard that UNRWA is continuing to move forward with just basic day-to-day needs that people have, trying to reestablish schools for the coming school year, despite all of the destruction and death that we are seeing. UNRWA maintaining that if children aren't given some hope and some education, that bitterness and anger and division in the occupied territories will only be harder to overcome going forward.
All right, thank you so much, Kristen. Thanks for that reporting from the UN.